Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew and welcome to my Sewing for Beginners series. Now in this video I'm going to be discussing how you can finish the edges of your fabric to help to prevent them from fraying and to provide a professional finish to the garment or product that you're making. Now in this video I'm going to be chatting through and showing you a variety of different techniques that you can use, and then I'm going to be feeding you off to individual tutorials where I actually show you how to complete these techniques. Now, it really depends on what you're making and the fabric that you're using, which of these techniques that you use. And generally, I'll probably have a bit of an order of priority as to which techniques I would prefer to use. My starting point would always be to try and create a really professional couture finish, and that would be to use seams such as a French seam. A French seam is a seam that you actually stitch twice, and the seam allowance itself contains all of the raw edges of the fabric. It's a really neat professional looking seam, but it's only really suitable for use in lightweight fabrics. It's perfect if you're working with silks, and it's wonderful in sheer fabrics where you don't really want to see the seam allowances. As well as the French seam, another seam that can be used to hide the original edges of the fabric is a flat furled seam. And there are a variety of different techniques to create a flat furled seam and variations of the seam. However, the flat furled seam is what you will see on denim, in trousers, and in shirts. Again, the original seam allowances are tucked away and hidden in the seam itself, so it provides a really nice, flat, professional finish to a garment or product. Now, both of those techniques are great, but you might not want to use either of them on the project that you're making. It really depends on what you're making and the fabric that you're working with. So then you might decide to reach for the overlocker or serger. Now, this is a separate machine to the sewing machine, and the overlocker or serger can be used to finish the edges of the fabric. It can also be used to join layers of fabric together if you're working with a stretch knit fabric, a jersey or something very stretchy. The overlocker is fantastic at finishing the edges and providing you with a really professional, neat finish. And if I was making something like a high street style dress, the overlocker or serger is what I would use. Generally speaking, I use a 3-thread overlock stitch to finish the edges of my fabric. I then go to a 4-thread overlock stitch if I'm joining layers of fabric together. But you might not have an overlocker or serger, and then it comes down to a number of other things. The first thing is that you might just decide to line your garment. You could be making a dress and you could decide to add a lining. If I'm making jackets, and I pretty much would line all of my jackets, I don't even touch my overlocker or serger. I would barely finish the edges of the fabric unless I was having real problems with the fabric that was fraying, and then perhaps I would use pinking shears or something like that in order to prevent the fraying as I was sewing the garment together. But generally when I'm lining a garment, I don't use any of these techniques. I simply line it and seal it all in so that I've got a really professional result. However, if you only have a sewing machine, there are a variety of techniques that you can use on your sewing machine to help you finish the edges of the fabric and to prevent fraying. The first one, or the most professional looking one, is what is called an overcast stitch. And most machines have a couple of different options when it comes to an over edge or overcast stitch. And I will show you in my video how to do these techniques. You can also use a zigzag stitch that stitches over the edge of the fabric. Again, that's going to be fabric dependent and sewing machine dependent to a certain extent. If those stitches don't work for you, perhaps with the fabric that you're using, or you don't have them on your sewing machine, you can just do a standard zigzag and cut very close to the zigzag stitch in your seam allowance. And this will again help to prevent fraying. And the final option is that you simply grab a pair of pinking shears and you actually pink the edges of your fabric or the seam allowances in your garment. So there are a number of different options that you can use, and that's really the sort of priority that I would complete them in. I would think about my sort of couture French seams, flat furled seams first. If I'm going to line a garment, I don't really need to worry about any of it. And then I'd look at the overlocker or serger. For me, that's generally what I use. But as I said, if you don't have an overlocker or serger, the stitches that are available on your sewing machine will help you to finish the edges of the fabric and help to prevent them from fraying too. I really hope you enjoyed this short tutorial and you understand the techniques that you can use to provide your garments with a more professional finish and to help prevent the fabric from fraying. Please do follow the links to the corresponding tutorials and learn how to complete these techniques.